Thank you so much for joining us this evening for a very special presentation of this beautiful piece of literature, A Child's Christmas in Wales by Dylan Thomas. I'm Jerry Griswold, the Director of Administration and Development at White Memorial, and I have with me a panel of extraordinary writers and journalists and broadcasters, John Dankosky, Diane Smith, and David Leff, to do this wonderful reading this evening. I hope you really enjoy it. Diane actually prompted me earlier today to wear pants to the program tonight, which I'm doing. Because I know that all of you, since the pandemic, working home, never wear pants. I'm wearing pants tonight just to tell you how special an evening this is. But Diane said it would be a great idea, since many people are from out of town, that I tell you just do a brief little showing about what White Memorial is all about and what is White Memorial, as it is a very special place. Can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. So I'm just going to give you a little quick 2-hour program on White Memorial. Because our reading is only 10 minutes long. No. The White Memorial Foundation was established in 1913 by an extraordinary man, Elaine White, and his sister May White, brother and sister who never married, who had a beautiful summer home called Whitehall, which is now the museum in Litchfield, where we all work. And they just had a bee in their bonnet about saving open space in a time when people weren't saving open space. And back in the early 1900s, everybody was doing agriculture, and the Whites didn't think that way at all. They wanted to preserve the area. And so May was quite a bit older than Elaine, about 10 years older, and she ended up being really a caregiver to him. There were several other children in the family, but the focus of our attention, of course, is on the Whites, Elaine and May. And as May grew older and became ill, the tables turned, and Elaine really took care of her. Their father, John Jay, well, the money in the family was made through, in the beginning, it was fur, believe it or not, and real estate and law. And if any of you are familiar with the city of Danbury, there's a very famous street called White Street, and that's named, I believe, after John Jay. So this is Elaine. It wasn't his dog, Countess Elka, a Borzoi, a Russian wolfhound, but this is one of our favorite pictures of Elaine. He was a brilliant man. He was a published author. He was a botanist with books on botany, published, I think, several volumes. He was a chess master who solved German chess codes in World War I. And they were just kind and giving people. They were always giving to the children in the area, having ice cream socials and all sorts of wonderful plays staged in the backyards at Whitehall. They brought children in from the city to summer camps on Bantam Lake. They were just two of the kindest, most benevolent people, and they managed to amass 10,000 acres of open space. 4,000 is right in the Litchfield Bantam Morris area, but the other 6,000 was gifted to the state of Connecticut, and it's the foundation of our state park system. Beautiful state parks like Kent Falls, Macedonia State Park, People State Forest, Dean Ravine, Campbell's Falls were all properties that were once owned by Elaine and May White. Here, state of Connecticut, take them. The White Memorial Foundation was established in 1913, and the state of Connecticut established our park system in 1913 as well. Well, White Memorial looks a little bit different today than it did in the days of Elaine and May. Now it is the largest privately held wildlife sanctuary in our state and home to beautiful animals like this. Many of these photographs were taken by Leo Kalinsky Jr., who is our anointed king of photography, our court photographer at White Memorial. And just look at a couple of pictures of these stunning animals that Leo has taken pictures of on the property. The face of northwestern Connecticut would look entirely different had it not been for the fingerprints of Elaine and May White all over it. We have 40 miles of hiking trails, 4,000 acres of open space. The property is open for your hiking pleasure, morning, noon, and night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. You can drop your kayak in the Bantam River and paddle up to Little Pond. You can walk up to my favorite place, which I think is heaven on earth, the top of Apple Hill. And of course, this is the Little Pond Boardwalk, undoubtedly the most special piece of property that we have, and certainly the most visited trail. What was most amazing to me during COVID-19 when everything shut down is how many people retreated to nature. And I guess I shouldn't have been surprised by that, but I really was quite taken by how many people flooded to our trails. And I think that is bottom line, whether nature, you were part of nature to begin with before COVID or not, nature is something that is inside all of us and we need it, whether it's a place for meditation, just to get some fresh air, to stretch your legs. We all need nature. And COVID-19 has really, truly shown us the importance of open space. And so for all of you who are involved in your land trusts and in conservation efforts, you know, I applaud you because it's people like these that are going to be growing up to become the next conservators and will be taking care of all this land for us. And we need to preserve this for them, not just those beautiful animals that you saw before, or Hansel and Gretel that are living down at the end of this path. This is a presentation that I do every year at 9/11 as a memorial to the victims of 9/11 at the top of Apple Hill. And the Whites use this property for poetry, for outdoor dining, obviously for nature, for David Leff coming and reading many books. Some of my favorite photographs of you, David. And of course, most of all, we're here for children, to educate children. And I think it's something that we do particularly well. This beautiful rock, Memorial Rock, it's called, in the Five Ponds area of White Memorial, is engraved in the most grateful memory of Elaine and May White, brother and sister who loved the quiet and beauty of the forest and who saved these thousands of acres for us. So if you could please consider becoming a member, we would love you even more than we do already, or making a donation, any amount. Remember, from little acorns grow mighty oaks. You can just visit our website, whitememorialcc.org. So thank you, Diane, for mentioning this to me today and for allowing me to indulge you a couple of minutes with some of that. So I'd like to give just a little bit of a background on each of our presenters tonight, and we will begin with Miss Diane Smith, who is a distinguished lecturer in the Department of Communication and Film and Media Studies at the University of New Haven. Diane is a New York Times bestselling author, Emmy Award-winning journalist, and documentary producer. Diane's broadcast career included WTNH-TV, CPTV, CTN, and WTIC News Talk 1080, where I just drove her crazy every single day. And that's how we became such good friends. She's the author of 6 books based on her Positively Connecticut TV series, including Christmases in Connecticut and A Connecticut Christmas. John Dankosky is a journalist and radio host who has worked in nonprofit journalism for more than 30 years, most of them at Connecticut Public Radio. He is the director of multi-platform content for the Connecticut Mirror, where he hosts the podcast Steady Habits. You can hear him as the regular fill-in host for Science Friday in New York, where he also works on news and special radio projects. You can hear John reading poetry for Christmas Angelicus, the seasonal concert of Chorus Angelicus, and interviewing artists of the Litchfield Jazz Festival. David K. Leff is an award-winning poet and essayist, poet laureate of Connecticut, Canton, Connecticut, and the author of 6 nonfiction books, 3 volumes of poetry, and 2 novels in verse. He's a former deputy commissioner of the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection. By appointment of the National Park Service, David served as poet in residence for the New England National Scenic Trail, NET, during 2016-17. He's the deputy town historian and town meeting moderator in his hometown, and also served 26 years as a volunteer firefighter. David recently co-edited New England Nature, an anthology of early nature and environmental writing. I'm the Director of Administration and Development at White Memorial. I've handled bats for 28 years as a wildlife rehabilitator and educator, and I'm licensed by the Connecticut DEEP as well as the USDA to keep wild bats, they're all wild, of course, non-releasable for educational purposes. Also porcupines, I handle those as well. Over the years, my bats and I have delivered hundreds of programs to libraries, classrooms, scout troops, and organizations like the National Park Service, Yale Peabody Museum. I've appeared on the cover of the Weekly Reader, produced a segment about bats for The Late Show with David Letterman, and most importantly, I was featured in Seasons of Connecticut by Diane Smith, published by Globe Pequot Press, released in June 2010. I'm the morning voice of traffic on WRCH WTIC AM and WZMX FM. And if that's not enough, in 2010, I launched a travel company, Crummy Travel LLC, which takes small groups of well-behaved adults who are not crybabies, cranks, and panty waists on extraordinary trips to Iceland. About what we're reading tonight, A Child's Christmas in Wales, is by Welsh poet Dylan Thomas. It was recorded in 1952, but it wasn't published until 1955. And the work is an anecdotal reminiscence, I've been up since 4:15, guys, of a Christmas from the viewpoint of a young boy portraying a nostalgic and simpler time. It's one of Thomas's most popular works. A Child's Christmas in Wales uses descriptive passages in a fictionalized autobiographical style designed to create an emotive sense of nostalgia. Thomas is remembering a Christmas from the viewpoint of the author as a young boy. He searches for nostalgic belief in Christmases past. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. Furthering his idyllic, that sounded kind of like Alfred Hitchcock, but whatever. Good evening. Furthering his idyllic memory of childhood by describing the snow as being better and more exciting than the snow experienced as an adult. Isn't that true? The dissertation, with exaggerated characters for comedic effect, show how childhood memories are enlarged through youthful interpretation. And so, without further ado, I just want to make sure we get my gallery view right, John. Like
it's up
that.
in the right-hand corner. There we go. Yes.
Yeah, we're okay. We present to you A Child's Christmas in Wales.
One Christmas was so much like another in those years around the Seatown corner, now and out of all sound, except the distant speaking of the voices I sometimes hear a moment before sleep, that I can never remember whether it snowed for 6 days and 6 nights when I was 12, or whether it snowed for 12 days and 12 nights when I was 6.
All the Christmases roll down toward the two-tongued sea, like a cold and headlong moon bundling down the sky that was our street. And they stop at the rim of the ice-edged, fish-freezing waves, and I plunge my hands in the snow and bring out whatever I can find. In goes my hand into that wool-white, bell-tongued ball of holidays resting at the rim of the carol-singing sea. And out come Mrs. Prothero and the firemen.
It was on the afternoon of the day of Christmas Eve, and I was in Mrs. Prothero's garden, waiting for cats with her son Jim. It was snowing. It was always snowing at Christmas. December in my memory is white as Lapland, though there were no reindeers, but there were cats. Patient, cold, and callous, our hands wrapped in socks, we waited to snowball the cats. Sleek and long as jaguars and horrible whiskered, spitting and snarling, they would slink and sidle over the white back garden walls. And the lynx-eyed hunters, Jim and I, fur-capped and moccasin trappers from Hudson Bay, off Mumbles Road, would hurl our deadly snowballs at the green of their eyes.
The wise cats never appeared. We were so still, Eskimo-footed Arctic marksmen in the muffling silence of the eternal snows, eternal ever since Wednesday, that we never heard Miss Prothero's first cry from her igloo at the bottom of the garden. Or if we heard it at all, it was to us like the far-off challenge of our enemy and prey, the neighbor's polar cat. But soon the voice grew louder.
Fire!
Cried Mrs. Prothero, and the beat the dinner gong.
And we ran down the garden with the snowballs in our arms toward the house. And smoke indeed was pouring out of the dining room, and the gong was bombulating, and Mrs. Prothero was announcing ruin like a town crier from Pompeii. This was better than all the cats in Wales standing on the wall in a row. We bounded into the house, laden with snowballs, and stopped at the open door of the smoke-filled room.
Something was burning all right. Perhaps it was Mr. Prothero, who always slept there after midday dinner with a newspaper over his face. But he was standing in the middle of the room saying,
"A fine Christmas,"
and smacking at the smoke with a slipper.
"Call the fire brigade!"
cried Mrs. Prothero as she beat the gong.
"And they won't be there,"
said Mr. Prothero.
"It's Christmas."
There was no fire to be seen, only clouds of smoke, and Mr. Prothero standing in the middle of them, waving his slipper as though he were conducting.
Do something.
He said, and we threw all our snowballs into the smoke. I think we missed Mr. Prothero and ran out of the house to the telephone box.
Let's call the police as well.
Jim said.
And the ambulance. And Ernie Jenkins, he likes fires.
But we only called the fire brigade, and soon the fire engine came, and 3 tall men in helmets brought a hose into the house, and Mr. Prothero got out just in time before they turned it on. Nobody could have had a noisier Christmas Eve. And when the firemen turned off the hose and were standing in the wet, smoky room, Jim's aunt, Miss Prothero, came downstairs and peered in at them. Jim and I waited very quietly to hear what she would say to the firemen. She said the right thing always. She looked at the 3 tall firemen in their shining helmets, standing amid the smoke and cinders and dissolving snowballs, and she said,
Would you like anything to read?
Years and years and years ago, when I was a boy, when there were wolves and whales and birds the color of red flannel petticoats whisked past the harp-shaped hills, when we sang and wallowed all night and all day in caves that smelt like Sunday afternoons in a damp front farmhouse parlor, and we chased with the jawbones of deacons, the English and the bears, before the motor car, before the wheel, before the Duchess-faced horse, when we rode the daft and happy hills bareback, it snowed and it snowed. But here a small boy says,
It snowed last year, too. I made a snowman and my brother knocked it down, and I knocked my brother down, and then we had tea.
But that was not the same snow, I say. Our snow was not only shaken from whitewash buckets down the sky. It came shawling out of the ground and swam and drifted out of the arms and hands and bodies of the trees. Snow grew overnight on the roofs of the houses like a pure grandfather moss, minutely white-ivied the walls, and settled on the postman, opening the gate like a dumb, numb thunderstorm of white, torn Christmas cards.
Were the postmen then, too?
oh, with sprinkling eyes and wind-cherried noses. On spread frozen feet, they crunched up to the doors and mittened on them manfully. But all that the children could hear was a ringing of bells.
You mean that the postman went rat-a-tat-tat and the doors rang?
I mean that the bells that the children could hear were inside of them.
I only hear thunder sometimes, never bells.
There were church bells, too.
Inside them?
No. In the bat-black, snow-white belfries, tugged by bishops and storks. And they rang their tidings over the hand-aged town, over the frozen foam of the powder and ice cream hills, over the crackling sea. It seemed that all the churches boomed for joy under my window, and the weathercocks crew for Christmas on our fence.
Get back to the postmen.
They were just ordinary postmen, fond of walking in dogs and Christmas in the snow. They knocked on doors with blue knuckles.
Ours has got a black knocker.
And then they stood on the white welcome mat in the little drifted porches and huffed and puffed, making ghost with their breath, and jogged from foot to foot like small boys wanting to get out.
And then the presents?
And then the presents after the Christmas box, and the cold postman with a rose in his button nose tingled down the tea tray slithered run of the chilly glinting hill. He went in his ice-bound boots like a man on a fishmonger's slabs. He wagged his bags like a frozen camel's hump, dizzily turned the corner on one foot, and by God, he was gone.
Get back to the presents.
There were the useful presents, engulfing mufflers of the old coach days, and mittens made for giant sloths, zebra scarves of a substance like silky gum that could be tug-of-warred down to my galoshes, blinding tam-o'-shanters like patchwork tea cozies, and bunny-snooted busbies and balaclavas for victims of head-shrinking tribes. From aunts who always wore wool next to the skin, there were mustached and rasping vests that made you wonder why the aunts had any skin left at all. And once I had a little crocheted nose bag from an aunt, now, alas, no longer whinnying with us, and pictureless books in which small boys, though warned with quotations not to, would skate on Farmer Giles Pond, and did, and drowned, and books that told me everything about the wasp, except why.
Go on to useless presents.
Bags of moist and many-colored jelly babies, and a folded flag and a false nose and a tram conductor's cap and a machine that punched tickets and rang a bell. Never a catapult. Once, by mistake that no one could explain, a little hatchet and a celluloid duck that made, when you pressed it, a most unduck-like sound, a mewing moo that an ambitious cat might make who wished to be a cow, and a painting book in which I could make the grass, the trees, the sea, and the animals any color I pleased. And still the dazzling sky blue sheep were grazing in the red field under the rainbow-billed and pea-green birds.
Hard-boileds, toffee, fudge, and all sorts, crunches, cracknels, humbugs, glaciers, marzipan, and butter Welsh for the Welsh, and troops of bright tin soldiers who, if they could not fight, could always run, and snakes and families and happy ladders and easy hobby games for little engineers, complete with instructions. Oh, easy for Leonardo. And a whistle to make the dogs bark to wake up the old man next door to make him beat on the wall with a stick to shake our picture off the wall. And a pack of cigarettes. You put one in your mouth and you stood on the corner of the street and you waited for hours in vain for an old lady to scold you for smoking a cigarette. And then with a smirk, you ate it. And then it was breakfast under the balloons.
Were there uncles like in our house?
There were always uncles at Christmas, the same uncles. And on Christmas mornings, with dog-disturbing whistle and sugar fags, I would scour the Swatch town for news of the little world, and find always a dead bird by the white post office, or by the deserted swings, perhaps a robin, all but one of his fires out. Men and women waiting or scooping back from chapel with taproom noses and wind-bust cheeks, all albinos, huddled their stiff, black, jarring feathers against the irreligious snow.
Mistletoe hung from the gas brackets in all the front parlors. And there was sherry and walnuts and bottled beer and crackers by the dessert spoons. And cats in their furabouts watched the fires, and the high heap fire spat, all ready for chestnuts and the mulling pokers. Some few large men sat in the front parlors, without their collars, uncles almost certainly, trying their new cigars, holding them out judiciously at arm's length, returning them to their mouths, coughing, and then holding them out again as though waiting for the explosion. And some few small aunts, not wanted in the kitchen, nor anywhere else for that matter, sat on the very edges of their chairs, poised and brittle, afraid to break, like faded cups and saucers.
Not many those mornings trod the piling streets. An old man always, fawn-bowlered, yellow-gloved, and at this time of year with spats of snow, would take his constitutional to the white bowling green and back, as he would take it wet or fine on Christmas Day or Doomsday. Sometimes two hale young men with big pipes blazing, no overcoats and wind-blown scarfs would trudge, unspeaking, down to the forlorn sea to work up an appetite, to blow away the fumes, who knows? To walk into the waves until nothing of them was left but the two curling smoke clouds of their inextinguishable briars. Then I would be slapdashing home, the gravy smell of the dinners of others, the bird smell, the brandy, the pudding and mince, coiling up to my nostrils, when out of a snow-clogged side lane would come a boy, the spit of myself, with a pink-tipped cigarette and the violet past of a black eye, cocky as a bullfinch, leering all to himself.
I hated him on sight and sound, and would be about to put my dog whistle to my lips and blow him off the face of Christmas, when suddenly he, with a violent wink, put his whistle to his lips and blew so stridently, so high, so exquisitely loud, that gobbling faces, their cheeks bulged with goose, would press against their tinseled windows the whole length of the white echoing street. For dinner we had turkey and blazing pudding, and after dinner the uncles sat in front of the fire, loosened all their buttons, put their large, moist hands over their watch chains, groaned a little, and slept. Mothers, aunts, and sisters scuttled to and fro, bearing tureens. Auntie Bessie, who had already been frightened twice by a clockwork mouse, whimpered at the sideboard and had some elderberry wine. The dog was sick. Auntie Dozy had to have 3 aspirin, but Auntie Hannah, who liked port, stood in the middle of the snowbound backyard, singing like a big-bosomed thrush.
I would blow up balloons to see how big they would blow up to. And when they burst, which they all did, the uncles jumped and rumbled. In the rich and heavy afternoon, the uncles breathing like dolphins and the snow descending, I would sit among the festoons and Chinese lanterns and nibble dates and try to make a model man-o'-war, following instructions for little engineers, and produce what might be mistaken for a sea-going tram car.
Or I would go out, my bright new boots squeaking into the white world, onto the seaward hill, to call on Jim and Dan and Jack, and to pad through the still streets, leaving huge, deep footprints on the hidden pavements.
I bet people will think there have been hippos here.
What would you do if you saw a hippo coming down our street?
I'd go like this, bang. I'd throw him over the railings and roll him down the hill, and then I'd tickle him under the ear, and he'd wag his tail.
What would you do if you saw two hippos?
Iron-flanked and bellowing he-hippos clanked and battered through the scudding snow towards us as we passed Mr. Daniel's house.
Ooh, let's post Mr. Daniel a snowball through his letterbox.
Let's write things in the snow.
Let's write Mr. Daniels looks like a spaniel all over his lawn.
Or we walked on the white shore.
Can the fishes see it snowing?
The silent one-clouded heavens drifted on to the sea. Now we were snowblind travelers, lost in the North Hills, and vast dew-lapped dogs with flasks around their necks ambled and shambled up to us, baying Excelsior. We returned home through the poor streets where only a few children fumbled with bare red fingers in the wheel-rutted snow, and catcalled after us, their voices fading away as we trudged uphill into the cries of the dock birds and the hooting of ships out on the whirling bay. And then at tea, the recovered uncles would be jolly, and the ice cake loomed in the center of the table like a marble grave. Auntie Hannah laced her tea with rum because it was only once a year.
Bring out the tall tales now that we told by the fire as the gaslight bubbled like a diver. Ghosts hooed like owls in the long nights when I dared not look over my shoulder. Animals lurked in the cubbyhole under the stairs where the gas meter ticked. And I remember that we went singing carols once, and there wasn't the shaving of a moon to light the flying streets. At the end of a long road was a drive that led to a large house, and we stumbled up the darkness of the drive that night, each one of us afraid, each one holding a stone in his hand in case, and all of us too brave to say a word. The wind through the trees made noises as of old, and unpleasant and maybe web-footed men wheezing in caves. We reached the black bulk of the house.
What shall we give them? Hark the Herald?
No,
Jack said.
good King Wenceslas. I'll count 3.
1, 2, 3, and we began to sing. Our voices high and seemingly distant in the snow-felted darkness round the house that was occupied by nobody we knew. We stood close together near the dark door. Good King Wenceslas looked out on the feast of Stephen.
And then a small, dry voice, like the voice of someone who has not spoken for a long time, joined our singing. A small, dry, eggshell voice from the other side of the door, a small, dry voice through the keyhole. And when we stopped running, we were outside our house again, and the front room was lovely. Balloons floated under the hot water bottle, gulping gas. Everything was good again and shone over the town.
Perhaps it was a ghost.
Jim said.
Perhaps it was trolls.
Dan said, who was always reading.
Oh, let's go in and see if there's any jelly left.
Jack said, and we did that. Always on Christmas night, there was music. An uncle played the fiddle, a cousin sang Cherry Ripe, and another uncle sang Drake's Drum. It was very warm in the little house. Auntie Hannah, who had got onto the parsnip wine, sang a song about bleeding hearts and death, and then another in which she said her heart was like a bird's nest. And then everybody laughed again, and then I went to bed.
Looking through my bedroom window out into the moonlight and the unending smoke-colored snow.
I could see the lights in the windows of all the other houses on our hill and hear the music rising from them up the long, steadily falling night.
I turned the gas down. I got into bed. I said some words to the close and holy darkness, and then I slept.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope you all enjoyed our little presentation. It just is. Yes, these are our cheat sheets. It's funny. I had never read this ever, and I found this little copy in my attic not so long ago. And I don't know, I just came up with this idea for a program, and Diane and David and John have been so wonderful to do this for us tonight. I think that we all need things like this in our lives right now. So I have some chats here going on. People really loved it. Bravos. Thank you very much. And I think, again, thank you all so much for joining me this evening, and for all of you wonderful people for helping us put this beautiful presentation on. And I guess that's where we end. Anybody have anything else to say?
Thank you, Jerry. Yes,
Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year, happy holidays to you all.
Thank you all so much. I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much, and have a happy, happy holiday.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for
Good night.
joining us.